Sunrise Extra. Hey, we are going to be talking about Rod Hill's winter outlook that he just released over the weekend. It's his long-range winter forecast, talking about a possible 6 to 10 inches of snow in one single storm coming up in January and February. This morning we are talking about fog right now with some colder temperatures. Rod is going to be with us in the Weather Center momentarily, but we have gotten so many hundreds of comments from you guys, particularly about the big headline of the snowstorm that is possible. So we did a poll this morning. It is up on your screen right now. We were asking, how do you feel about the possibility of a huge snowstorm in the metro area after the first of the year? 67% of you, I'm shocked, are looking forward to it. 33% of you are dreading it. My friend Drew Carney, come on in here.
I didn't know how long you could do this by yourself, or did you...
I'm an old hat at this now, just standing here chatting with our friends on social media. So we have an interesting perspective of, like, if you work a job where it's going to be shut down during a snowstorm, it's great. Put on the movies, put on the fireplace, make some soup.
Some people I know, if their kids have off from school, their bosses are understanding that means they also cannot come into work. They have to be home with the kids, and so they look forward to those school days off because that means a day off from work. But yes, we are.
What do we have to do?
Come to work.
Have to come in even more. Yeah, Brenda's across the room saying work.
But Brenda and I are on different sides of but she's done a lot more of these than I have in terms of winter storm coverages.
Yeah.
And there are times I know where Brenda and before me, Russ Lewis, and before Russ, there have been others where they sat there for 8-9 hours on end talking about the same thing over and over, which can be tough.
Oh, nice.
But I actually still like it when it happens because I feel like we become very relevant again. TV is not as relevant as it was 20 years ago. Honestly, I mean, people go to other avenues for their information.
You like to see the misery that everyone else is in, stuck on the road.
I feel like the snow pulls people back to the big screen, right? When it snows, people come back to the TV. Like that's the best place to watch snow coverage.
Here he is.
Oh, the man of the hour.
Man of the hour.
Come on in. Snuggle in.
Let me reset it.
I remember one time my mother called me from McMinnville after about 7 hours, and she said, Aren't you done? Are you still on? No.
Yes.
Is this a recording or is this live? Brenda
My mom was even complaining about how we monopolized the airwaves.
Your mom was complaining?
Yeah, well, about snow coverage.
So, Rod,
his mom doesn't
jackets off, by the way. This just got serious.
Okay, so you have some of your graphics up here for your winter outlook. Why don't you take viewers through some of the highlights and lowlights?
And earlier, Nina said, well, Rod, that's a boring graphic. I get it. But it is the basis of what I start my seasonal forecast work with. I'm going to assume that NOAA, the National Weather Service, is correct when they say, is it going to be El Nino, La Nina, or a neutral year? Again, El Nino, warmer equatorial Pacific waters, La Nina, colder, and neutral means the temperature is expected to be about normal. NWS, by the way, has an 85% confidence level that this will be the case this year, which is really a high confidence level for them. INSO neutral. We do get a jet stream flow. Typically, the coldest of the air stays up to our north and down into Canada. But this year, what I've been tracking is a surprisingly low confidence factor on projecting temperatures. Now, the outlooks from NOAA and the National Weather Service had us warm for October. I think it was the 4th coldest October we've ever had, so that was a catastrophe outlook. And it does highlight the fact that temperatures are going to be a tough call this year. So my forecast, neutral winter, I just came up with this term this year when I was doing my outlook, a positive tilt. So by the 10th of a degree, our ocean waters expected to be the equatorial waters we look at, slightly above dead flat neutral, but not warm enough to be El Nino. I'm going below normal rainfall. Could be similar to last winter, which was about a month shy of what we typically get, about 5 inches or so less than what we typically would see. Temperatures, again, this is interesting to me, low forecast confidence. I think will either be near normal or colder than normal, but not warmer than normal, which flies in the face of a lot of the national outlooks. I do not think it's going to be a warm winter. In fact, I saw when I was doing outlook forecasting last night at home, more evidence that we could get stuck with a really cold January. Remember last year, February was the real cold month. Likely snow in the valley floor. And I say no snow. This year, every data set I ran came up with something between 6 and 10 inches of total snow for the winter, and in many cases, Most of that snow came from one 8-inch event. This year, I think that's a possibility in January, most likely, or perhaps less likely in February. So temperatures near normal. If you average out, I'm doing November through March, right? You come up with just a half a degree above normal. And that would be averaged out, though, because of a very cold January expected. Precipitation, drier than normal by 79%. And again, here's that snow, January, February snow event. Possible, interesting, possible November snow. Maybe an inch at some point. A lot of, I know, a lot of the years, and we don't often see this, but a lot of the years actually hit with a little bit of November snow. Now, I think whatever we get between now and December would be less than 3 inches if we get anything, holding out for the best chance of anything really significant, meaning a snowstorm, if you will, until January. And this is huge news. So the last couple of years up on Mount Hood, the snowpack has been roughly around 70% of normal or slightly less. So for the first time in several years, I think we have 98%, basically a completely normal year. What does that mean? That would be 500 inches plus at Meadows, 600 inches or plus total snow at Timberline. Ski Bowl maybe struggles out of the gate, but then sees solid bases for January, February, March. And good snow base building kicking off in December would set up the stage for a good Christmas break as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not everybody knows how you put this together. Jeff Lucas is asking on our Facebook page, where do you pull that forecast? Can you just explain a little bit?
If you turn around and show us your backside, we will be very disappointed.
No. So again,
well played.
So let me put my clicker down for a second. So again, the Weather Service comes out, and you can find this on their National Weather Service page, if it's going to be an ENSO, a neutral, a La Nina, El Nino. So I monitor that. I start monitoring that in August, and I look for changes. I don't come out with my outlook until mid-October into the 1st November because I want to see that stabilize out. That's been a very stable call, neutral. Now I get to work. I go to the degree that they're projecting that we're going to be the degree of the ocean equatorial water temperatures. Then there's information and data sets you can find online that go all the way back to 1950 on this. So I sit there, I pull out all those years that match that temperature range, and then I average those out. What was the precipitation? What was the snow? Do we have windstorms? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then I take that and I go, well, what about taking that and seeing if I can add a cool, wet September, which we had? Typically, that doesn't lead to anything, and there was no correlation with that again this year. Well, what about the year before, which was a weak El Nino year? Does that add up to any years that went on to have what I'm calling a positive tilt neutral season the year after? There are only 4 of those years since 1950, so then I average all that out. And then I also look at outlooks from all sorts of meteorological agencies, not just the Americans, but the Europeans and the Canadians, and I see what they're looking at. And then I'm just finding, I don't look at the Russians. It's not very popular at this time of the year. And then I look and start fine-tuning everything until I see something that makes sense to me.
For patterns,
and then I come out with my outlook.
And you're averaging them.
So I thought you was just going to say, take all the data and then I kind of interpret it. Just a sentence.
I started to do this back in the winter of 2000-2001, and I've done it every single year since then, because all you otherwise get is a big national map that says you're going to be above normal or below normal or normal. And I'm like, well, what the devil does that do you? That doesn't do you any good.
Right.
Let's try to fine-tune numbers and say we're going to be below normal rainfall by 5 inches over the next several months. Last year, the big crowning jewel of my outlook was in October, I said the Mount Hood snowpack, when we measure it all, the end of April, would be 66% of normal. It turned out to be 69% normal, only 3% off. So that's a good example of me being successful. Now, some years, obviously, you're not as successful, but yeah.
I love it. Can we share some of these? We're getting some really funny comments.
There's so much to share.
People's snow. There we go.
So we're going to start with Brittany Jones. Brittany Jones says, when I left the East Coast, I planned to leave the cold and snow behind. Oregon is beginning to have northeast fall winter weather. Now, before we move to the next comment, is that true? Would you say we are kind of skewing more to northeast-like conditions?
I haven't looked at that enough to make a clarifying statement, but I will say this. The eyeball test over the last 5+ years seems to show more east wind days, which sets up the coldness that leads, in some cases, to snow.
Next comment on the board, I'm going to try to say the whole name because it seems to me to be a fun name to say out loud. Alex DePaula Colazzo.
Oh, yeah, Alex.
Yeah, she says, or he says, love it. For the haters, feel free to move to Arizona or Florida and stop crying. Next comment on the board. We snap the fingers and another one pops up. Bam! Stanford Walker, a favorite of this very feed.
Stanford,
Good morning, Stanford.
Good morning.
Stanford says, all right, it's time to break out the salt trucks.
Now again, we're talking about the odds of being elevated to see one big fat 8-inch snowstorm this year. I think the best bet of that happening is in January.
You know, before we even get to that, and I don't know, should we go here?
You're not going to read Nina.
Okay, sorry.
My dear friend Nina. We never hear of another Nina.
This is not that Nina. This is this Nina.
She feels dread.
Living on Mount Scott, Nina says, and getting off and on this hill is horrible.
Studless snow tires,
I'm
my
guessing
friend.
getting off the hill is quite easy if it's icy out.
Well,
Zoom.
every Nina I know likes to complain. I'm just saying. I'm kidding, Nina. I'm kidding, Nina. Not kidding, Nina.
Not me.
All right, here we go. What else we got?
But we also have all this information on our, like, people are watching us right now giving us feedback, so maybe we should read and share some of those. Irene says, and good morning, Irene.
Good morning.
Watching us on the feed.
Yeah.
We can't handle snow in Portland, she says. I'm sure the ones that want snow are kids or people who don't get to have to go out there and go to work.
Yep.
I don't know how many kids are voting in our poll this morning, but I was surprised, as you guys were, that 67% of the people said they were looking forward to this type of snow
A lot of
event.
people, you know, a lot of people actually get to stay home and enjoy it too.
Right.
Which if I got to stay home from work and enjoy it, I would be like, bring it on.
Oh, Shannon is calling us out. Sorry, but I don't think anyone can predict a snowstorm 2 to 3 months in advance.
Can I answer that quickly?
Absolutely.
No, I hear you. I embrace you. I love you. But I will say this. So what I do is play the odds. Let's say there's a 10-year data set that I'm looking at. I simply run the averages. Some years those averages are like, wow, 8 out of 10 of those years and this pattern had this. Now clearly that means 2 of those 10 years did not. And is this going to be one of those 2 10 years that does not? Absolutely could be. So I mean, I'm playing the averages, and I think that's the best you can do. Her point is valid and true. But if you play the averages, you're at least more than not giving people a good heads up as to what's going to come.
You play the odds, you don't play God. You're not perfect.
Let me think about that.
Wow. Didn't see that
Do you guys
coming.
have any more questions for Rod? While we have him live, you guys can weigh in. Let's see.
Mariah says, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. Just hold back the ice. That is
Yeah,
brutal.
the ice
I
is
agree,
no
girl.
fun.
Well,
No fun.
Cora says what you're predicting in terms of an 8-inch event or something there in that realm, she says that's not a storm. To her, Cora says a storm would be 1.5 to 2 feet
Where'd
of
she
snow.
grow up? Ask her where she grew up.
Then she claims if you can't drive in 4 or 5 inches of snow, stay home or catch the bus.
Where'd she grow up? She didn't grow up here.
Yeah, the roads, you know what, and I will say, I grew up on the East Coast. What is different here is that it is a lot hillier. And I would say, hey, what's different there is that they salt the roads, and that is a big difference.
We
but
just
also,
don't have the city plows and stuff in the numbers that we would
some
need.
of these hilly areas, they wouldn't salt those in Philadelphia. They wouldn't be able to get up there and do all that. So there would be problems there in Philadelphia like there are here on some of those big days where we have all these hills.
And growing up in the Midwest, the big thing is, at least if you live back east, the main roads, the second that storm hits, boom, those roads are treated, salted, whatever, and they are fine.
Right.
That's the big headache here. A lot of our main roads aren't even fine.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
True, Rod, true.
Yeah.
All right, if you want to check out more of Rod's winter outlook, we have it right there on the homepage at kgw.com. It's also on our YouTube page, your Facebook page.
And if you have questions, it takes just a few minutes. I urge you to go to kgw.com. It's easy to find it. The link is on the homepage. And just read. I'll get into the years I looked at, exactly what the departures of normal are that I'm looking at. And if you're wondering, well, how good is he at this? So my average going back to that first outlook at 2000 is 68.5% of everything that I say being in the acceptable range that I said it would be in. And you're thinking, well, 68.5, but the average as a scientific community on seasonal outlooking is more like 55 to 60%. So that's a mark that I'm really proud of, actually.
So the first winter you did this was 2000, 2001?
Yeah.
This is the 20th anniversary then.
Yeah.
This is your 20th edition.
Well done.
Wow.
I look forward to it every year.
Okay, our
have a
second
drink.
topic of the morning is really an icon of the Northwest. Columbia Sportswear CEO Gert Boyle passed away over the weekend at 95 years old. Our Maggie Vespa went back and pulled all kinds of different stories, including your chat with her in the KGW carpool, and she put together this really nice story. Check it out.
Happy birthday.
Have you softened at all?
No.
Will you?
No.
At 90, will you be softer?
No. Maybe fatter, but not softer.
The epitome of pulling no punches.
Men, when they get to be older, really don't like to take advice from a woman.
With killer comedic timing. Gert Boyle has, for decades, been giving women half her age a reason to dream bigger and push harder.
Don't get hung up on the fact that you're a woman. Don't get hung up on the fact that you're green, yellow, black, orange, or whatever. And take responsibility for yourself.
Her public persona skyrocketed in the 80s with this, now infamous ad.
Only one is the toughest mother of them all. Mother Gert Boyle.
More spots followed.
Hi, I'm Gert Boyle, Chairman Columbia Sportswear. My son Tim, our president.
And keep in mind, these were the commercials propelling Columbia Sportswear to the global powerhouse brand it is now. And Boyle loved poking fun at them.
Whether you laugh at it or not, it's sort of like a bad meal. You'll remember it.
She also loved revealing what it was like to be a woman in her male-dominated field. One story: following her husband's death in the 60s, Boyle took over as Columbia's president, only to find no one took her seriously.
A secretary knew a lot more than I did. Everybody else knew more than I did because I didn't know anything. And I'd say, hey, you know, you got to teach me this. And they'd say, well, we're busy. We don't have time. So I cleaned house.
It's true, she fired everyone. Years later, she was just as blunt. Here, in a KGW carpool segment that aired in February.
Did you have any moments coming up through the ranks where you were like harassed?
Oh, I mean, we have a bunch of chauvinists that work for Columbia.
Brenda Braxton asked if she was allowed to say that.
Will that not get you into trouble?
How can I get into trouble?
Yeah, who's going to get you into trouble? Nobody.
It's worth noting Boyle was still working when we shot that piece. Retirement wasn't for her.
And if a little old lady like I can do that, just think what those young people can do with their lives.
Columbia Sportswear tonight honoring Boyle's business savvy, sharp wit, and wisdom as they announce their tireless matriarch has passed away at the age of 95.
You're very intentional about the way you move through life, it sounds like to me. And you choose to concentrate on the positive.
You better.
Yeah.
Because there are so many negatives out there that would do you in if you thought about them all the time.
Maggie Vespa, KGW News.
She is something else. And I have to say that when we went to Columbia to shoot this, it was not supposed to be a carpool. We were going because Columbia was donating toys for our great toy drive. We were going to shoot a bit, and that was it.
We saw those teddy bears in the back seat.
Exactly, and we wanted to make it super easy on her. And she was just in such a good mood. I asked her, I said, do you have some time? You know, can I ask you a couple of questions? And the conversation just flowed. And she's got these sparkly blue eyes, and you just know she's full of the devil in the best kind of way. Just, you know, I said when we were on during the show, sometimes I wasn't sure if she was going to give me a piece of her mind or if she was going to give me a big old hug. She surprised me, and the things that she talked about. I circled back around when she said there were chauvinists still at Columbia. I'm like, you know what? I don't want to misquote you. I want to go back and I want to talk about this. And she was like, no, that's what I mean. Yeah. So I ended up having to call Tim Boyle, her son, and say, can you comment on this?
Yeah.
So it was such an interesting interview, because anytime you have somebody in their 90s, they've lived a lot and they've seen a lot. And I asked her, I said, do you regret anything? You know, she goes, no, I wouldn't do anything differently. And the other really sweet thing is that when I asked her what her proudest accomplishment is, and she said her children. And she said it's not because of money, it's not because of anything other than they're living their truth, they're happy, they're in good relationships, and that what is meaningful to her. And she also didn't think she was that tough. She said, I just know what I want.
You know, one of my favorite, I had the pleasure of meeting her several times, mostly at fundraisers, which she was a constant at, giving of her time and money. But one time I met her with a friend of mine at Columbia for lunch, and she walked in the cafeteria, just a standard, you know, cafeteria. Oh my goodness, does she know everybody's name? Roger, thanks for the peas. Grace, thanks for putting the milk on my plate, whatever. And then I found out, because I kind of asked around, what's going on here? And she was known for knowing every single person's name, from the janitor to the vice presidents of that company, and that's a special.
That's great.
Special quality.
The story that really sticks out to me most recently about her was when she was the victim of a home invasion robbery at her home in West
years
Lynn.
ago already, believe it or not.
It wasn't that long ago. She was living by herself in West Lynn in a home. And a guy, she pulled into her driveway, or in her garage, and a guy came up holding a copy of her book, One Tough Mother, and he said, you know, I know who you are, I want money, blah, blah, blah. And she had the forethought to say, hold on, let me go inside and turn off my alarm system first. So she goes in, and she hit the silent panic button, which sent that message to 911 dispatch. And he took her in there, the cops came. She got a little roughed up. I think she had like a black eye and some bruises and stuff. The funniest quote that the Oregonian just reminded me of when I was reading through their story this weekend was, the police chief, the West Lynn police chief, came over personally to her house to see how she was doing. And he walked in, he said, how you doing, you know, Miss Boyle? And she said, well, everything was fine until you walked in that North Face jacket. And just like the spark and fire and wittiness, you know, in one of probably the scariest moments of her life. I mean, she actually fled Nazi Germany with her family as a young girl.
That's great.
But just, I love that, you know, hearing about her.
I asked her about that as well, and she said she called the guy an idiot, and she goes, I don't even think about it anymore.
The home invasion.
Like, I said, how are you doing? Does that stay with you? She goes, no, don't even think about it anymore.
But didn't that hit you? That don't we think of these? She was a billionaire. Don't you think of these billionaires having their security staffs and their entourage around them? But she wasn't like that. She
lived
went
a pretty
home
normal life.
like anybody.
You're right, but again, to your point, she was 86. The day that happened, she was 86 years old, and obviously still had her wits about her, but it was also physically tough still at 86 too. The guy was not kind to her, to put it mildly, right? Like you said, she got roughed up a little bit. Did he not read the cover of the book? Did he not know who he was messing with that day in 2010? It was amazing that she was able to live and tell about that story as well.
She has an amazing life. She had an amazing life. And again, I asked her back in November, because we did that carpool a year ago this month, and I said, what are you looking forward to in 2019? And she goes, what am I looking forward to? I'm looking forward to survive, you know? And she just had that edge to her, and she was amazing. I mean,
one of the greats, and really just one of the faces of Oregon, you know, that we all kind of grew up with. So, all right, you guys, thank you for chatting live with us. Again, you can check out Rod's Winter Outlook on all our social pages. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.